Cricket has allowed us to meet so many people who've brought in a different color to the game. And today joining me is someone with whom I've really enjoyed interacting with over the years. In fact, we all have had the pleasure of watching him talk about the game, but also more importantly, bowl all those years ago and give us all those good memories. But today we know him as someone who entertains us, who gives us a good perspective of the game, but at the same time enjoy it as well. So Danny Morrison, thank you so much for joining me all the way from Queensland. How have you been?
Nish, I'm well. I loved your intro there about, having lots of colour and fun because look at this lovely bowling ball head for bowling. We love bowling our bowling heads off.
But Danny, I mean, I've had the pleasure of interacting with you for years now, and you're one of the most cheerful people. We always get this energy around you. How have you been dealing with these times where most of us have been like?
Well, I've spoken to a couple of your colleagues from India, of course, lots off and on, and we've really all missed the Indian Premier League, which has been so sad and so frustrating for cricket lovers, and particularly the uniqueness that is the IPL, like no other. So how have I been dealing with it? Very simply, I've been fortunate, or maybe not so fortunate, because I've been around because of COVID. There's been no IPL, so we moved house. Moving house is not a lot of fun, and there's a lot of stuff to shift and move. So I've been fortunate that, in a way, I've been around with that to help. And it's, my God, it's weeks of process of going through stuff, and mostly when you move, it tends to be the wives. You're married, your partnership. There it is. They know best where things go in the house, how they want it, all those sorts of things. So Nish, it's been challenging, but it's been fun as well. And I must admit, it's just nice to be home, to be able to help with that sort of chore, if I can put it like that, a chore of that magnitude of moving and shifting and lifting, all those things.
But I saw a video of you bowling to your kids and playing a bit of cricket. No, there it is. Is that a regular affair, or it was just a one-off?
Yeah, not overly, because they're now 20. Jake's nearly 21 and Taylor's 22. And
really, I thought you were 21 or 22.
I wish I probably feel like it, but certainly don't move like it. But yeah, that's where we moved from. So that video clip was in the townhouse near the hospital where we've moved from, and we've only moved, luckily, Nish, only 2 or 3 kilometres away from where we were. And so that there was upstairs in the townhouse scenario, and it wasn't quite as cluttered. And that's right, the boxes hadn't all come out, and we hadn't started packing the house up, so it allowed us. I think that video was taken around early April, wasn't it? Early mid-April, and we moved right at the end of April. So yeah, that was a bit of light relief. I think it was on a Friday evening, and Jake said, mucking around and again being a bit bored, and there's only so much Netflix or movies or music you can listen to, whatever distractions. I got into reading actually a lot. I read, and I know particularly in the subcontinent, very different music genres and people's likes, whether it is movie entertainment, music, whether a lot of people do yoga, different forms of relaxing, if you like. And so I read an autobiography about Roger Daltrey, who was the lead singer for a band called The Who, who were massive in the 60s and 70s out of the United Kingdom. And I think for a lot of us who've played cricket as youngsters in England and been influenced by that, and look at that as people of interest. It's a bit like, I suppose, in India, Bollywood stars. You've got so many Bollywood stars and Bollywood singers, and singing again is globally. It doesn't matter what religion, culture, what background you're from. Music is just, it ties us all together so beautifully in different likes. So yeah, it was fascinating, Nish, to sit back. That was one of the books I read. It was great. Roger Daltrey, his perspective on life, how the Who was all those years ago, all that madness they got up to, as rock bands tend to. Get carried away in Yahoo. So yeah, law unto themselves at times. But yeah, very interesting, fascinating book.
It's great. And talking about India, you've had a long relationship with this country. Your ODI debut was here in that game at Nagpur. And what has that relationship rather been with this country? Because it just looks like you've embraced it, and people also in turn have taken a great liking to you.
Well, I've been very blessed, Nish, in terms of, you go on about that World Cup in 1987. It was the first one outside of England, wasn't it? Because they were 75, 83, wasn't it? 75?
Yes. 75,
75,
79.
79 and 83. Yeah. Those first three were in the United Kingdom, the so-called home of cricket and what have you. And then to be able to see the transition, if you like, of the subcontinent, and in particular, I suppose India, because it is the biggest out of the four, if you like, the most populous, rah-de-rah-de-rah, and how it's evolved and changed and become such a big beast within the game of cricket in the sort of the family fraternity, as it were, of the test playing nations, and now with franchise T20. It has been a great journey when I think about it, and very blessed to know how tough it is to come to India and play because of the heat, the travel, and back at those times, very much around the cleanliness and the hygiene. But now the 5-star hotels and how much everything's improved, and airports, and just simple things about like moving around, whether it's trains, planes, automobiles, you name it. It's been fascinating, say from, let's say, that's the last 30 years, from 1990 through to today. It's been an amazing journey. And the other thing I think for me that's helped embrace it in terms of you love the food. As I've always said to people in this part of the world, back in the West, Australia, New Zealand in particular, where I hail from, if you don't like rice and you don't like being adventurous about your taste buds and wanting to try different things and sauces and curry and all of these sorts of different things and different vegetation, beautiful. So I've been very grateful about that and love doing it. And the other thing is, as Kiwis and Aussies, we sort of butt heads when we play cricket. It's a bit like, not quite as much as India, Pakistan, but there is a rivalry. It's not on that scale, of course not. Nothing really is it really? But when I look at the great Dennis Lilly and his coaching academy he had at an MRF at Chennai, and being able to come to that in 99, I did my level 3 coaching course then. And I think with that sort of meeting some, people away from cricket, just lovely families around cricket, but away from cricket, has been really pleasurable, lovely. I've taken my family there to Chennai. I went to a friend's wedding there, the Menons, their daughter Anu getting married in 2008. And so I brought my mother to IPL in 2013 when she was capable, it was easy to sort of travel. So, I brought mum along, and my mother's a Sufi. So she embraces, in terms of Buddhism, but meditation, the spirituality of that sort of prayer, if you like. So mum's, very looking at different all the time, something very different. But my mother, big on spirituality, big on meditation. And for me to have that sort of, if you like, upbringing and awareness, of Swami, ashrams, different prayer, going up to Dharmashala, the Dalai Lama, all of the different diversities that is India, which is massive, hugely different, and different religions, different backgrounds, the north, the south, the east, the west, the food, everything fascinating. So I've been very grateful and truly blessed to have been lucky enough in a time zone, as we mentioned, 1990, last 30 years of playing, then commentating, a little bit of coaching involved, thrown in the mix there with Dennis Lilly and other little clinics we've done. So Nish, I to say I've embraced it has been an understatement, really. It's been great. I've loved it.
It's interesting you mention your mother, because I don't know if you remember, but years ago we had this interview in Dubai during the Under-19 World Cup. And I remember you telling me she comes from an arts background, and as a kid, you started doing pantomimes and a few plays in school. And that sort of gave you the confidence to handle yourself on stage in front of people. How much was that grounding important for you to get into commentary and what you're doing now?
Oh, look, I credit that a lot, Nish, without a doubt. And I think just to be able to step outside of that realm, because at times, even now, look, you know, I'm being really upfront here. There's times when you sort of don't really want to step out and do that. And that's because there may be something in the background going on emotionally back home, or something that's happened, someone may be ill at home, all that sort of thing. We all have that. And yeah, I think for people that perhaps haven't, branched out into that, and then clearly there's a lot that don't. If that's not your persuasion, and a lot more people like to be comfortable in their own bubble of what they're doing, and that maybe just say, they're a lawyer, they're a doctor, they're an accountant, they're an engineer, they're serving in other ways. And ours, I just look at it, we're serving in a different way, and ours happens to be a bit more about entertainment, like we call it in inverted commas, cricktainment, don't we? Because it's T20, it's the marriage, if you like, of the Bollywood type film stuff and the razzmatazz of 2020 that's so fast and furious and noisy and big atmosphere, big crowds. And so you're right, that pantomime and that upbringing of being able to start to be comfortable in front of people in an audience situation, because look, I'll be honest to you, like even things like public speaking, some people really don't. It's one of the greatest fears, apparently. And my wife does it for a living, and she really hated it and did it at school. She got embarrassed and stuffed something up as a 12-year-old or something and hated it. And then now you sort of branch down those avenues. And for a lot of us that, talk or speak in front of large audiences, doing live things, whether it's a coin toss, whether it's a presentation, post-match or an interview, you've got to get into that and get used to being doing that. And some like it more than others, Nish, or thrive more in that area and enjoy that more than others. And that's just, again, I think you've got different strengths and different areas that you like, perhaps more so than other areas.
And it's quite fascinating, if I may use that word, because you fine-tune your own style according to the format and the audience. Like, we see you commentate in Test cricket, and that's a very measured, a quieter version. In T20 cricket, it's someone who's catering to the masses. How did you get that pulse of the audience when, say, T20 cricket emerged, and change your styles according to the format?
Well, I think the great thing I can mention, that the simple thing, and it is great because it's the crowd and it's about the fan base. And at the end of the day, the fan base is clearly there too for Test cricket. I'm not saying it's one or the other. I just think there's the energy because it's faster and it's more furious. And it's around, I've mentioned this too before, for wanting a bit of take on it, a bit sort of Americanized, if you like, because of cheerleaders and because the music's been brought in, the noise and all that sort of stuff. It's taken it to a new sort of entertainment, whereas Test cricket, different gear. And I've always said too in other interviews like this, Nish, is that you're simply changing gears. Or if you use the analogy of Bollywood or movies, Hollywood, you just have a different genre. One's, quite a serious type detective movie, and it's, sensible and serious and critiquing or factual or this, or getting to a point within that genre, as opposed to something that's a bit light, but rom-com, bit up, a bit fired up and razztazzy, or an action thriller, a Bruce Willis type Yah-Rahoo movie. That's again a different gear. So for me, it's about fluctuating with all of them. And people often also ask your position, Nish, what do you like the best? What do you prefer doing? And I think energy-wise, of course, T20, because the fans are there. It's played at night predominantly, so it's more like an entertainment production of, going to a live theatre show. Whereas Test cricket, definitely more during the day, isn't it? I mean, there is now, as we know, night Test cricket, pink ball, whatever. But really, predominantly, Test match cricket is for the red ball, white clothing during the daytime. And I think that's beautiful. And I'd be am I a bit old and conservative, Mish? I love that format, and it's been around so long. And yes, they're trying to tweak it, and we understand the pros and cons of it, but certainly the understanding of trying to get it into the audiences at night. But Test cricket is just such a great old grand game that has all its nuances and all its variations. That should be, yes, there's some marketing type tweaking going on, but predominantly it should be left to its own device, as opposed to white ball cricket and what it brings as well. So, do I gravitate more to white ball cricket? Of course I do. It's, I tend to do that genre more. But that's not to say I don't love Test cricket, and I do enjoy doing Test cricket as well.
And now that you're in Australia, but I must take you a few years back when you were actually quite a problem for them on the field, took quite a few wickets in the 1993 series especially. What was that rivalry for you? Like, how will you describe an Australia-New Zealand rivalry to someone from an India or a Pakistan? And you did quite well against them. Talk about the 1993 series in particular.
Well, I think it's always about, and probably the comparisons, I suppose, if you're talking to a Pakistani versus an India scenario, because we're smaller, Pakistan's smaller than India. India's got all those resources and sheer numbers and all that weight of that history. And we're a bit like that, if you like. That comparison is that we're smaller cousins next door, less resources, less history, of course. So, you're always that David Goliath scenario, that some old sort of cliche in sport, but it really is there. It's, they're a much bigger setup. They've got the resources. They've got all of that, rah-de-rah-de-rah. And, you want to stand up and have a crack and do well against them. So I always loved that rivalry. And I think it stemmed from watching Dennis Lillee and Richard Hadlee, locking horns, those sort of two guys. And then playing in Australia and fascinated because of that great Aussie side through the 70s, the Chappell brothers, Lillee and Tomo, Rod Marsh, Maxie Walker, David Hook smashing Tony Gregg, all that sort of thing, that centenary test, and watching clips of stuff like that influenced as a youngster to think, geez, that's cool. I'd love to be involved in some of that. And really, I think from my mother's stuff, that pantomime stuff from the late 70s, and having embraced Dennis Lillee and Richard Hadlee and watching them on their stage doing that, and I was doing a bit of pantomime and what have you, I really thought, man, that's a cool stage. I want to get on that stage and play. And that was i.e. At Eden Park in Auckland, or the MCG or the SCG, just fabulous. And so for that, that was perhaps a part of it as an inspiration as much as anything, was getting out there and, of course, playing for your country. But that was a challenge and a goal of mine, years before when I was at school, saying, I'd love to run in and open the bowling with Richard Hadlee, and people just laugh. Look at you little hobbit. How on earth are you going to do that? Oh, you have to wake up and smell the coffee. Really, come on, you're dreaming. And it wasn't so much, Nish, about proving them wrong or I'm going to show you. I was just simply so encapsulated with that dream or that vision of wanting to do that and wanting to go there to Australia and play there. And I was fortunate. My father lived in Melbourne, and we're talking before on air. Your sister lives in Melbourne, so my father lived in Melbourne and went there full time about 1980. He was in and out of there around the 70s when my parents split up. When I was about 7, and he was in and out of there in the 70s. But he went there full time in 1980. So he had those 2 decades, the 80s and 90s. And so for me, to go to my sister way back in late 81, just after Christmas. So it was, parents got us 2 kids over there, go and see your dad. And that was late 81. And I went to the Boxing Day test match at the end of it. So they let us in for free because Dennis Lillee had gone through the West Indies. He'd just taken Lance Gibbs's world record, 310th test wicket, went to that test match. Fascinating because I think they were about 8 down overnight, 7 or 8 down. And the gates are open and people could come in for free. And it was great. And then Dad took my sister and I, just as a part of history, to go into the MCG. He was in an apartment over in St Kilda, and to go and see that was just wow. It was just a real excitement for me. And then he took me to a one-dayer a couple of weeks later in January, and I'll never forget. I used to have this ticket sitting in my wallet in the butt, and it was January the 10th, 1982. I remember going to watch the West Indies beat Australia, and we were up in one of the bleachers high, and that was the old MCG, not the new one which they built and developed for that World Cup in '92. This was 1982, 10 years before that. So you got there, and just seeing this noise and this atmosphere and this theatre, which was just incredible. Big chili bins full of ice pouring down onto the, guys drinking and drunk, Aussies going crazy, and just pouring this ice down on from one of the other tiers on the stage. You imagine doing that at Wankiti, being at one of the levels. I had to be up in the Sachin Tendulkar stand. And we just got so horribly drunk. We filled up this big chili bin esky and just poured all the ice and water down to the guys below. Well, you get thrown out and arrested and thrown in prison. But back then, and throwing stubby drink holders, just terrible fighting and carrying on. You just can't do that today. But it was such a different landscape. And to see all that, I mean, that part of that day inspired me, watching those guys, the great, Mikey Holding steaming into Bruce Laird, and seeing those guys perform it, Greg Chappell, all of that stuff, Dennis Lilly, it was just amazing. So that theatre for me inspired me massively.
And a few years later, in fact, you were playing at the MCG in that famous test match again and bowling with Richard Hadley. What was it like bowling with someone who had inspired you, and also that test match at Melbourne where New Zealand came ever so close and Mike Whitney just defended out the last over?
I know when you look back at that and just talking about that MCG test of 1981, the West Indies there, and then, having a look at that, and then all of those years later, 6 years later, it's quite fascinating really to think that, here I was as a, turning 16, I was 15, turning 16, and here I was 21 back, in 87, turning 22, just suddenly again crossing. There was a lovely article written, and it was about the Sorcerer and the Apprentice, like Hadley the Sorcerer, me the Apprentice, but and then me crossing the border, because I've got Alan Border out as my first test wicket, and there's Danny crosses the border from fantasy land, to reality on the stage. And so it was a lovely story, and it was really, a lovely piece. And when I look at that, suddenly, I kept pinching myself. And in fact, at times you look back on it and you think, God, look at you, long hair, flowing with the mullet, tearing in, and playing there for New Zealand. It really was a dream come true to play on that sort of stage, that young. And we should have won that test match. Terrible LBW, turned down by Dick French. What a dog. And it was his last test match. Get him out of here, hang him. But, and that LBW would have won us the test match, and we wouldn't have lost the series. It would have made it 1-1. So, it was a lot riding on that decision. And you look back on it and but it was just an amazing time of your life. Young, traveling around, doing what you want to do. Here's your dream. Living it, basically that lovely old line, living the dream. Of playing alongside the Crow brothers, Ian Smith, the keeper, John Bracewell, the off spinner, Ewan Chatfield, all those guys, Johnny Wright. It was just a great time to be young and realising a dream.
I wanted to ask you this specifically. Did you retire a little too early? Because I was checking your records, and in fact, in your penultimate ODI and your penultimate test match, you had gotten quite a few wickets, in fact, 5-wicket hauls. So was it decision because of a retirement, because of an injury rather, or was it that you wanted to move on to do other things?
I think there was a combination of lots of little things. I'd suddenly turned 31 and, getting on that other side of 30. And there was a lot of injuries. I had actually over 246, 92, 94 and 96. I had groin injuries. So I had the 2 hernia operations. I had one in Manchester, 92 was my first one. And then in 94, I had a laparoscopic hernia on the other side. And then in 96, I had a adductor tendon release. So they trim. A lot of footballers get it running sideways, kicking a soccer ball, or rugby players, a lot of the kicking action. And so same with that, same with bowling. I think, guys like Wasim Akram had that adductor tendon release operation because you're stretching through the bowling crease, very demanding on the body. And then there was a whole nother setup, new coach came in. We had we had Steve Rickson, who was an outside influence because he was an Australian. He sort of had no baggage in history. And I think, and understandably, when I look back on it, you're upset and emotional at the time or whatever. Sure you are for a while. But you look back in hindsight and retrospectively and go, there was a lot of us who were, on that other side, Mark Greatbatch, Dipak Patel, myself, Ken Rutherford had gone off to South Africa to play overseas, domestically there, all of that. And that was because the coaches, it was time to move to perhaps a new brigade, bring the broom in, sweep it clean, let's get some other younger blood in and develop a side a bit more with some young talent to go through for a future cycle. And so, I can understand that a bit. It was tough at the time, batting with sunglasses on and saving a test match because we were right in the poo. And then, Nathan Astle got 100 at one end and I got 14 or something not out, facing a truckload of balls and having a lot of fun. And just, it was my testimonial season. They don't have those anymore because the games got so professional, but they used to give us a celebration season, and you could run functions, dinners, luncheons, merchandise. We did a magazine type thing of your whole career, and you'd sell this sort of paraphernalia, all that sort of thing. So it was a great time and good fun. Just a shame, towards the end you got sacked, and I sort of quite grateful really to way, that's it, you've had your time, move on, let's sack this old fiend, get rid of him, and it was time to move on.
Just finally to talk about the commentary career that has come after that. You said you dabbled a bit in coaching with the certificate at Madras, but how much has commentary meant to you? Because right now people associate you more with the commentary and maybe do not sort of talk about Danny Morrison, the fast bowler, as much as they talk about Danny Morrison, the commentator.
And understandably too, Nish, because, you can play, let's say, and when I look back on it now, breaking it up, you played 10 years, if you could, 10 years internationally and doing it for a living and traveling around the world and really enjoying that and living that dream. When I look at it, for me, like 20 to 30. And then from now, in your early 30s and that, moving on, and I've done it for the last 20 years, in terms of commentary, sort of semi-full on doing that in between other different sports type jobs and working in radio and doing some sales advertising and radio back when I was in New Zealand and Auckland and hosting some radio shows, moonlighting with cricket, hosting a magazine cricket show with Martin Crowe was the executive producer at Sky Sport New Zealand. So, in between mixing different bits and pieces of commentary, television, radio around the game of cricket. Been very grateful again for that. And I love it. And I have been very fortunate in terms of this revolution that really is T20 franchise global cricket. And it's allowed me to then have fun with stuff, dress up sideline, be with someone like Gaurav Kapoor, dressed up, Sammy and all the gang, with Archana Vijay, hamming it up, having a lot of fun, dressing up sideline, throwing down and doing an interview, and having a lot of energy around stuff. That can be summarized probably a little bit more theatrical rather than full-on statistically cricket orientated, where that certainly has its place, no doubt. And I think when you look at the production of difference now of the IPL, Star taking it over from Sony in India, Star have got very much more of a cricket content of current former players in a studio scenario, and then we're out there doing the world feed commentary, not so much the Hollywood, Bollywood, Showtime stuff that Sony did. So it's just different, and they've pieced theirs differently together. But look, yeah, people always ask it, oh, look, you ran and played for New Zealand, you took over 150 Test wickets, you played with Richard Hadley, you got a hat trick against India in a one day and all that sort of thing. So people just go, oh, did you? But the great thing is you can go onto YouTube, you can find it, and they go, God, is that you with hair? I don't recognise you. But you do, and you look at it. So when you look at me now, you say it's such a different look. Bald old fart versus young guy tearing in with hair and doing something very different, because of course it's so physically demanding, versus sitting behind a microphone and chatting and interviewing people and going, so a different world, total different person, if you like, and at times, but still the same lunatic character that had fun and smiling and laughing and joking a bit whilst I was playing. And that's my personality. That's what I like to bring to the show, if you like, i.e. the show of playing, or the show of now commentating on the other side of the fence and doing that.
Danny, thank you so much for doing this. And I'll tell you why this conversation was very interesting for me. It's because I prepared a few questions, but I didn't need to ask you all of them, because you just seem to answer them and anticipate them rather than getting me to answer them. And I think it's also a quality of a
sorry.
No, it's quite
so,
a quality.
Oh, good. Oh, look, as I say, and that for me, people initially ask you about that in terms of how does that flow for you. I said, at the end of the day, it's a bit like we're having a conversation now. And I remember getting some tips and advice from Tony Gregg, Ian Smith, all those sort of guys that I was starting out with. And they all had that common thread in a way, is that if you can make it smooth and quite seamless with your conversation of what you're discussing, and it's just like you're sitting at home in your own living room with the audience, with all the other fans that are sitting in their lounges on their sofas at home, but you're pretending it's almost that you're with them. I mean, that's a massive compliment to broadcast. If you can just relax with it and have that conversation time. Mine's a bit different, of course, when it's T20, because people get freaked out that I'm going to jump through the television, I'm yelling at them, or it's just gone madness and it's so full on. But that's just the octane of T20. And then that's why people laugh and go, they either, and as I've always said to you, you've got to be thick-skinned, because a lot of people are going to give you abuse and be very critical of you and judge you. But then again, they don't know the other side of where, if you're doing test match cricket to watch or have me doing that. And that's why it's amazing on social media. Go, oh, yeah, that's him. Oh, okay, and he's now doing, God, he's calmed down. Oh, he's not yelling at me through the television because it's simply not T20. It's test cricket, or it's 50-over cricket, and there's another different level of test 50-over, then T20, and then T10, where it's, cricket on steroids. You've got it full on because it's night, it's noisy, big crowd, big atmosphere, fully amped. So it's quite different. So it is fascinating to discuss with you in this scenario of how things are, or how things transpire through television or radio, or even doing interviews, having fun. I tend to ham it up and go crazy sideline and try and have the guy relax. And that's as part of my job in a way, is making the well-known current cricket guy relax a bit. And I tend to do that. They tend to laugh with me anyway. They know what's coming. And it could be a bit wild in terms of the interview sideline of, Ian Bishop's upstairs, or, Tom, okay, let's go to Morrison, you madman. Where are you? What's going on down there? Let's go to you, across to you. Who have you got for us, And then you just get into it. So it's got to be, and I think, that's part of the entertainment of white ball cricket, being a bit sort of crazy and having fun.
Yes, and Danny, I do hope that sometime soon all this gets cleared up and we can welcome you back to India, so that we all have the pleasure of watching the game we love, and of course hear you talk about it and entertain us, give us that happiness. That's what we are all waiting for, and it's been great to do this.
Oh, good to talk, Nash. Good to talk to you, brother.
Thank you, Danny, and yes, we will be back soon.